Hey guys, welcome back. Got another cool old grain hauling truck in my shop. This is a 1977 Mack R model. It's an RL600L to be exact, which I believe is the long hood version R model. And this thing is super clean. So under the cab there is the Max-a-Torque 5-speed transmission. That's the triple countershaft gearbox that Mack was famous for. It's got an air ride cab, which is good because it also has the Mack Camelback spring suspension. And I believe, yep, those are the Mack top loader axles. So this is one heavy duty drivetrain. I wonder if it even has steer axle brakes. Uh-oh. So it does have steer axle brakes, but it's got the old wedge style brakes. These things are a pain in the butt. Super clean underneath the hood. So a turbocharged engine. I'm not sure, I think they were all turbocharged. Maybe the Thermodyne was not turbocharged. I'm not an expert about Macks. Pretty funky air cleaner setup on it here. Pretty cool. And got the huge inline injection pump on it. Looks like the engine was remanned in 1984. So if you can't read the tag there, looks like the mains are 20 over, the rods are 10 over, and the liners have been bored 30 over. So I'm pretty sure these Maxidine engines all have dry sleeves. Another thing that's kind of odd about it, it has an aluminum frame. Well, the truck's here because it won't start. And I think I know what's going on. He's got a few other complaints. I guess the coolant temperature gauge doesn't work. So he's also getting oil out of the air dryer when it purges. And he had the air compressor replaced, but he's still getting some oil out of this dryer. So we're going to replace the filter cartridge inside, and hopefully the old one is just kind of packed up with oil. Now he also wants me to look into some of these oil leaks, but I'm not sure we're going to get very far with that. I mean, it's an old truck and they're all notoriously bad oil leakers. There really aren't any easy ones to fix. So that's what it does. It just clicks, the solenoid just clicks and doesn't make contact. So what I want to do right now is just make sure that we're getting enough current to the control wire. So I got my little amp clamp hooked up there. So we're just going to watch the meter while I turn the key. Okay, so 47 millivolts should equal 4,700 milliamps, so 4.7 amps on that control wire. So yeah, almost 5 amps should be way more than enough to energize that solenoid. So I don't think we have a control problem, we have a bad solenoid. Well, let's see if it'll start. I got my remote starter switch right here, and I plugged it in about 30 minutes ago. It wouldn't go first thing this morning, but maybe now that it's warmed up, it'll actually go. So if you don't like sparks, you might want to look away. Might have a slight exhaust leak. I'm good. So my dad actually installed these half fenders over the summer, and he was almost positive they'd be ripped off by now, but they look pretty good. These guys use this truck for hauling grain in and out of the field. And with that Camelback suspension, you get a lot of articulation, so the fenders have to be kind of comically high off of the wheels in order to not rub. Looks like the trailer rubs pretty good on the top of the fenders, but you know, what are you gonna do? So for my money, I don't see any reason to do any further testing on the solenoid here. We know that the control wire is capable of carrying 5 amps. That should be plenty of current to actuate the coil. And we know that the high current terminals there are capable of carrying enough current to power up the solenoid on the starter. We've confirmed that by jumping those with a screwdriver. So that's it. We don't have to go any further. It needs a solenoid. Well, I think I was wrong. This is not a Maxidine, it's a Thermodyne, at least according to that tag on top of the valve cover. So I'm not sure what year they switched over from the Thermodyne to the Maxidine, or if they made them in parallel. Like I said, it's 1977, so this is a little bit older than what I'm used to. Anyway, I think I figured out why the water temperature gauge doesn't work. Pretty sure, can you guys see it? Yeah, back here behind this power steering reservoir is the coolant temperature sensor, and the wire's broken off of it. Well, it's not a wire. It's actually the old style with the copper tube, and the tube just broke off. So we'll have to see if we can get one of those. I don't know if they're universal or if it's kind of specific to this truck. I guess we'll have to dig it out of there and find out. Well, it looks like somebody's already replaced the water temperature gauge with an aftermarket gauge, so maybe we should just do the same thing. So there's that triple Countershaft Mack transmission. I don't really know of anybody else that did that. They were kind of the only ones. I mean, you look at the size of this thing. That thing is absolutely massive, and it's only got 5 gears. Now, this is not a twin stick truck that only has one lever. A lot of the 5-speed Macks have 2 sticks, and so you use the one stick for your low and reverse, and then the other stick for your whatever other gears. So it looks like the output shaft yoke there is leaking a little bit. So we got a pretty good leak from the yoke going into the power divider there. Looks like maybe the actual power divider itself is leaking pretty good. Well, he was also complaining about the brakes. He said the brakes are not as strong as they used to be, but the shoes look like they're brand new. Maybe a little bit more worn on the top than the bottom, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I thought maybe this truck would still have the old manual slack adjusters, but looks like somebody has converted it over to automatics, so that's a good thing. Well, I don't like the looks of this air line back here, so this is one of those reusable style fittings, but it looks like this is at the back of the truck. They must have just backed it into some stuff, and then this whole bracket is broken, so it's just kind of bouncing around. So we better take care of that. We don't want this valve just bouncing around. That's going to rub through all these hoses. You see, most of them have already been replaced, but it looks like this one's starting to get kind of chewed up too. So we'll fix the bracket, and we're probably going to have to make a new line there. So pretty old school setup on the batteries here. So it's got 2 batteries on this side hooked up in series. So you see that's the positive, and it's hooked up to the negative. This is the positive terminal of the battery here. So two in series on this side and 2 in series on the other side of the truck, 4 total batteries. But this is not a 24 volt system. This is a 12 volt system. These are 6 volt batteries. So normally when they have 3 cells like this, that's a 6 volt battery. So the way it works, you have 2 in series on this side giving you 12 volts, 2 in series on the other side giving you 12 volts, and then those are hooked up in parallel. So go ahead and try to wrap your head around that. Anyway, the result is that we have 4 batteries, and it's a 12 volt system. It's just kind of some extra nonsense going on here. So that's the gizmo right there. It's a Presto light solenoid, 100 amps, 3 wire, and then this bottom plate is a ground. So we'll see if we can match that up to something. I don't know if it really needs to carry 100 amps. So all it does is turn on the big solenoid right here on the starter. So it's basically, you know, kind of like a relay powering a relay. Anyway, there's some other electrical problems we're gonna have to fix. So I see there's a piece of SO cord here, and all the insulation is cracked and broken on that. So we're gonna have to fix that. I don't know why this SO cord does that so badly. I see this all the time. It gets to a certain age, and then the insulation on the actual conductors just falls apart. The outside insulation is pretty hardy, but this stuff on the inside is not. And I'll bet you that runs all the way to the back of the truck. That's probably for the tail lights. Anyway, we got to fix that. And then this terminal strip is broken. He's all concerned about that. I don't know what we're going to do with that. You know, this is old school stuff before they had weather pack connectors and all this fancy new stuff. This is the way they used to do it. Okay, here's what I came up with for the starter solenoid. It's a little bit different. This is a 4-post instead of a 3-post, but it won't make any difference. So the extra terminal here is for the old school ignition system with the ballast resistor. Now, like if you're familiar with the Delco ignition system, they do this exact same thing, but the solenoid's built right onto the starter. This is a kind of a separate style, pretty much straight out of the Ford parts book. Then I just picked up a whole new mechanical water temperature gauge, so we'll just swap out that whole unit. And this one's black, might match a little bit better than that silver one that they put in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and clean this up because I don't like that at all. Somebody added this inline fuse holder and they just tapped into the power here at the starter solenoid for it, which is fine. But I don't like that nasty looking terminal, so we're going to clean that up real quick. So recently I put out a video about replacing an alternator in a Toyota RAV4. So in the process I put a little bit of dielectric grease on the output terminal of the alternator before I installed the charge wire. And to my surprise, I had multiple people comment that that is the wrong way to do it. That in fact the dielectric grease is an insulator, because die means, opposed to electricity, and that the dielectric grease would in fact resist the flow of electricity through the connection, and that the proper way to use dielectric grease is to apply it on top of the terminals after they've already been installed. Now, I can tell you that I've put dielectric grease on the contact surfaces of thousands of electrical connections. Thousands. And I have never, ever, ever, ever had the dielectric grease cause resistance in the connection. That is in fact a myth. And there are multiple videos on YouTube debunking that myth, but it seems to be pretty pervasive, which again is kind of a shock to me. But it's the internet. You never know what could happen. Now, one of the cool things about having a YouTube channel, like I do, is that I get to learn things from the comment section. So a lot of smart people are watching my channel, and a lot of those smart people have a lot of helpful tips for me. So one of the things that I've learned from the comment section of my own channel that I did not know is that the dielectric part of dielectric grease doesn't actually come into effect under normal conditions. For these types of connections, we could use any kind of grease that we want. It really doesn't make that much difference. Why don't you no go? So where the dielectric part of the grease becomes important is when you have the possibility of arcing. So in the event of an electric arc, such as, let's say we put this dielectric grease on the contacts of a big switch, and now you have electric arcing, causes a lot of heat, and it causes the dielectric grease to burn. So what's going to happen with the petroleum-based grease is that the grease will burn, and because it's a hydrocarbon, it will leave behind carbon, which is conductive. So it has high resistance, but it is in fact conductive, and that causes problems. So the reason that we use dielectric grease is because dielectric grease is silicone based, and when it burns, it does not leave behind conductive carbon. So if you're one of these guys who believes that dielectric grease inhibits the flow of electricity through an electrical connection such as this, I will put a link in the description to some articles and some videos that probably explain the phenomenon better than I can. Personally, I like to be very thorough and put the dielectric grease on every layer of the connection. That way you get the maximum kind of barrier against water and salt intrusion. And I mean, it's only going to do so much, but at least it helps for a while. Now, another thing that works very well with any kind of electrical connection, battery, cables, or anything that you might think of, is to use a rust preventive substance like this Stabil or fluid film. It's kind of lanolin based, and you just spray it on like so. It makes a big gooey mess, and eventually this will break down, but it does do a very good job of protecting these terminals. Well, I dropped my camera, which that's not a new thing. I drop it all the time. But this time she didn't wake up, and I took it all apart looking for a loose connection, a cable that popped off or something, and I didn't find anything. So there's a main light here that comes on when you turn it on, but the processor won't turn on. There's nothing on the screen, no noises, no nothing. So you guys are gonna have to suffer through with the GoPro for a little while until I can figure out a replacement for this thing, which it needs to be replaced anyway. You see I melted the viewfinder with the torch one time, and then there's so many artifacts on the lens here from welding and torching and pretty much destroying it. Man, the GoPro makes everything look so dark. Anyway, I'm draining the coolant out, and we're going to go ahead and change that coolant temperature gauge. So the sending unit is back here behind this, kind of behind this power steering reservoir. And I was going to try to do just kind of a hot swap and see if we could get away with not spilling too much coolant, but they've got some kind of a pipe nipple and a bunch of craziness going on there, so I want to get that all apart and see what's going on. Okay, so I got this little short pipe nipple here that's kind of stuck, and I can't get on it with a pipe wrench, so I'll show you a cool tool. This thing right here is it's a pipe nipple extractor. So you can actually get these at Harbor Freight, and they're pretty good. You know, it's not like something you use every day, but when you need it, you need it. Yeah, baby. Come on. That's like the fourth drop I've caught on camera on this video. Alright, we'll see if this works. Well, the reason they had all those pipe nipples and all that garbage on there was because this old probe was pretty long. But I think our new one's quite a bit shorter. Yeah, see, that would almost have gone. So I think we're going to be fine with the new one. Okay. Boy, that thing is sure cheesy. Oh well. I left a little curly Q of wire, or of the sending tubing here. Hopefully that'll help kind of absorb any vibration that we might have. And I'll just tie the rest of it up and should be good to go. Okay, I think we're done. Looks pretty clean. A lot better than having all those pipes and extra garbage hanging out there. I did end up pulling this power steering reservoir off so I could get the access to the bolts for these loom clamps and go ahead and tuck that copper line in those loom clamps. And then, I don't know if you can see it, but I installed a new grommet there too. So we'll go ahead and button up the dash once we get all of the electrical figured out. I don't want to do it now because he said the backlighting wasn't working. So I want to make sure it's not a circuit problem. So just make sure when you do this, you got to start by feeding that copper tube all the way through every single passage, because you know it's permanently attached to the gauge, doesn't come off. Oh man, the light does not play well with this GoPro. Okay, on the firewall here is a terminal strip. Actually, there's two of them, and they're plastic, and this one is broken. The customer doesn't like it. He wants to replace it. I offered to glue it, which I think would be totally fine, but he really didn't go for that idea. He wants a new one. Mack used these on a lot of different models, so I think it's possible I could find a used one, but my normal used truck parts source did not have one. So here's what I came up with. This is a new terminal strip from McMaster Car. It's got the same number of circuits, 14 circuits, but it's a double row terminal strip, and it's got roughly the same pitch between the terminals, but it's a little bit closer, so it's a little bit shorter. But I think we can make it work, and it looks like most of these, you know, ring terminals and stuff are pretty small, so I think we'll be okay. Anyway, I'm gonna carefully try to change over this first terminal strip, and if that works out okay, we're gonna do the other one too. Well, doesn't look too bad, I guess. I mean, obviously it doesn't match the other one, but I think it'll do the job. And I think we'll just leave well enough alone, and we'll leave that other terminal strip the way it is. If he doesn't like it, I can change it out later. But we do need to do something about this. That's that SO cord. The insulation's all busted up on the conductors here. So I think what we're going to do, we'll just strip this jacket back a little bit, see if the insulation's any better inside the jacket. And if it is, we'll just put some little pigtails on here and patch it up that way. There's no slack in that cord, so I can't pull any more wire out. What is it, pup? Yeah, I know. Max gets very concerned when I start talking to the camera. He thinks there's somebody in here he can come see. It's just me talking to myself, pup. That stuff is pretty crusty. Oh, they should have never used SO cord for this. I know, I'm too opinionated about wiring, but I deal with so many electrical problems and wiring problems that after a while you just get worn down. Okay, yeah, it looks pretty good. So the conductor insulation is good underneath this jacket, so we just need to splice on some little short pieces here, and we'll be good to go. Okay, here's what I came up with. So I just spliced onto the SO cord with some little tails here, and I'm gonna cover the whole splice with a big piece of shrink tube like this, and we should be good to go. I don't know if it's the UV light or what it is that destroys that conductor insulation inside of this SO cord, but for whatever reason it just doesn't last very long. So you're probably also headed for the comment box to write something nasty about how I made all the wires the same color. In the truck world, that's pretty normal. This truck seems to have a multiple wire colors in the harness, but normally on big trucks all the wires are black, and they do everything with circuit numbers. So I went ahead and labeled these each with a number. So we'll slap it back together and we should be good to go. Well, I think it looks pretty good. So I'll hose that down with some of that Stay-Bil goo, hook the batteries back up, and make sure everything still works. A good thing about this truck, we don't have to worry about letting the smoke out of any computers or modules or anything like that. Okay, I'm going to change this air dryer cartridge real quick. And I did this once before on a video, and a lot of guys asked me about this strap wrench that I'm using. I think it's made by Lyle, or sold by Lyle. I will attempt to put a link in the description if I can find it. Works pretty good. Caterpillar also sells a really nice one. It's one of the few things you can buy at a cat dealership that doesn't cost an absolute fortune. Okay. Man, look at the run out on that thing. wonky on that one. A little rusty. Oh. Okay, we need to make a new one of these. Yeah, that'll work. So we don't need a new bracket, we just needed to drill a couple of new holes in the bracket. Put this one back in up here. What's wrong with that? I think it'll work. So that's what they should have done in the first place, but instead they tried to, I don't know, this must have been the old bracket and they must have tried to just bend it up so they could put that other bracket on there. I'm not really sure what the reasoning was for that. Anyway, I think that's going to work just fine. Okay. Okay, we got to replace this air hose. It's looking pretty sad. So I don't know if it's a common size. We can just buy one off the shelf, or if we need to make one. These are reusable fittings, but this one's looking kind of sad, so we may not be able to reuse this one. Left-hand thread. Come on, guy. Yeah, it's been a while. It has been a while. You know, basically it screws together and makes kind of like a crimp, except that they can be reused. So this one's in good shape. We can reuse that one. Okay, this one's not any good. It's actually basically rubbed through right here, so we're going to need a new fitting. So one new fitting and a new piece of hose and we'll be all set. Okay, I've got our new hose made up, and I did reuse the one old fitting, and then I had to buy one new one. So when it comes to this air brake stuff, you can't mess around. You have to buy the approved stuff. So this is SAE 100R5 hose, which is a type of reinforced hose that's DOT approved for use with air brakes. You also have to buy fittings that are DOT approved for use with air brakes. Technically speaking, if you want to make hoses like crimp hoses together, you have to be DOT approved for assembling brake hoses, which I doubt that anybody actually does, but technically speaking, I think you're supposed to be. So there's a lot of risk associated with brake parts, especially on these big trucks. Where I live, farmers are allowed to gross 88,000 pounds with these rigs, and you don't want his truck, flying out of control, taking out a school bus full of kids because of some shoddy brake hose that you put together. So you kind of have to follow the rules. Okay, I think we're done back here. So this is our new hose that we installed, and I got it all routed up in the frame. Okay, I had to install one new loom clamp up here in the frame rail, and it looks pretty good. I don't think that can rub on anything. So we should be good to go. And I wanted to say too, on these fittings, these are -8 fittings, but they're marked for both SAE and JIC. So they're dual seat. They have both a 37-degree and a 45-degree seat inside the fitting. So they're compatible with, you know, either style. And that hose, they are proud of that stuff. $12 a foot for that hose, $18 for the fitting. So it's like a 6-foot long hose. I got over $100 in it. So we better talk about oil leaks, because I know he's going to ask me about that. I'd say starting from back to front, the input shaft for the power divider, that one's leaking pretty good. Oh, the output for the transmission, that seems to leak pretty good. And then the actual case of the transmission is leaking. That one's going to be really hard to fix. And then it looks like either the oil pan or the rear cover of the engine is leaking pretty good. The steering gear seems to leak pretty bad. Got a nice puddle on the floor down there. This is not something I'm familiar with. This is some kind of a little bit different steering gear. Looks like maybe it's leaking right here. I don't know where this input shaft housing bolts up. Like I said, I don't know that much about that unit. The power steering pump reservoir leaks a little bit. So over here on the right side of the truck, we've got a number of engine oil leaks. And it looks to me like the culprit is the tappet cover on the front of the engine. There's 2 of them. The back one's pretty easy to get to, but the front one requires the injection pump to be removed. So that's a pretty major job to replace or to reseal that. Probably beyond the scope of where he wants to go. Looks like maybe there's a governor cover on the front there leaking a little bit too. You guys can't see anything. This GoPro is terrible in low light. Okay, I think we're almost there. I've done a few other small tasks kind of off camera. Down here on the throttle linkage, there was a cotter pin missing. I replaced that. Up here on this little short jumper, there was a hose clamp missing. I replaced that. There's a throttle return spring back here. The end was broken off, so I just kind of rebent the end of that. And this one down here is kind of loose, so we'll have to just see how that goes. I don't know how important it is. And I'm in the process of refilling the coolant, which is no small task. This engine is airlocked like crazy. I only got about half the coolant in when I first started pouring. And if I would have known that was going to happen, I would have used my vacuum to suck it down. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't think I had all the old coolant out. Anyway, we're slowly getting it. I may have to run it for a while to get the thermostat opened up and get that circulated around. Well, I guess we better see if it's going to start. No worries. You probably can't tell on the camera, but the backlight's working. Yeah, all good. Alternator's not working. So the temperature gauge is working, but the alternator is dead. It's not putting out anything. I got the lights and the blower motor on, hang on. Yeah, something wrong there. Alright, we'll see if the old girl's got enough juice to go for a joyride. There's no computers or anything like that, so if we can get it started, we'll be fine. And I talked to the customer. He said the alternator's under a warranty. It's only a few months old. He bought it from a local auto electric shop that everybody buys from, and he's going to swap it out. So I'll pull it off there for him and he can take care of that. But we're mostly done with what we want to do for right now. So the big thing I want to check, he's still complaining about the brakes. Says he just doesn't have good brakes. So I got a feeling that it's a bad treadle valve or foot valve, which is the valve connected to the brake pedal, but I don't know that for sure. So this thing's old school. It's got 3 knobs. So you got to do yellow and blue to release the tractor brakes. And I haven't driven a Mack 5-speed in a long time. So Hopefully we don't wreck anything. Camelback suspension. Such a long delay between shifts. Hard to get used to. Well, that's weird. Now it's kind of charging. Wonder if you have to hit a certain RPM before the regulator turns on, because I only revved it up to about 1400. It's definitely working now. Okay, pretty good shakedown. I'm not sure about that treadle valve. We'll have to do some more troubleshooting with that. Alright guys, I think that's it. Thanks for watching. I am going to adjust the clutch and then maybe do a little bit more testing on that alternator, and then we're going to ship it out of here. But I've got a feeling it's going to be back to fix at least a few of those oil leaks. So if that happens, I'll try to bring you guys along. And this is a cool truck. I'd like to have one of these myself. I really wanted a B model Mack for a long time until I sat in one, and it's just too tight. I'm kind of a tall guy, and I don't really fit in a B model, but these R models are cool. And I know where there is one. It's newer than this, but it's set up pretty similar. all Mack drivetrain, Mack engine, transmission, axles. It's got Dayton style wheels, but it's got a 12-speed max torque transmission, which would be a bonus. So it's in really good shape, but it needs a camshaft, but I can't get the guy to sell it to me. So we'll keep working on it. Maybe someday he'll come around.